Hey everyone, um, want to thank you for being here and being a part of this time. Today's been a good day. It's Sunday afternoon, and I'm going to wait about a minute here for people to be told that we're coming on. So if you want to join me, feel free to come on and hang out with us. It's another Relate Well Live with Dr. Rick Marks, and I've got a camera here and I got one right there. I don't have the ability to kind of put them right side by side because I like to stream on Instagram over here. And I got my YouTube and my Facebook up over here on a different camera. So I've been kind of looking back and forth at the two. So you'll just kind of bear with me. Relate Well Lives, we've been doing these about 3 to 4 times a week. We have our big Relate Well launch coming up this coming Thursday, July 29th. Go to powerofuslive.com, powerofuslive.com, and get your free ticket for the Power of Us live event coming this Thursday, 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. All the details are at powerofuslive.com. Okay, so this Relate Well Live, we're going to be talking about sexual rejection and marriage. Sexual rejection and marriage. I grew up in a broken home. Many of you who've been kind of following me know my story. I grew up in a broken home, divorced, raised by my dad and my stepmother. I was raised to hate my biological mother, which I did do. I had to call her Mrs. Como growing up, and I did do that. I refer to her that way. And so I never emotionally bonded to my biological mother or my stepfather. And to be honest, I never bonded to my dad or my stepmother, who were the ones that raised me. They were broken people. Their own issues, and so they could not raise us kids to be healthy, mature people because they themselves weren't. But there's one thing I knew, from the emotional standpoint growing up, I wasn't valued. I didn't matter. That was a real clear message over time that I was sent. And so rejection was a part of my life. Abandonment was something that I was used to, you see. I was used to that. And we always have these hopes going into marriage, the hope that all the good things I ever wanted, I'll find with you. The hope that all the bad things that happened in the past, I'm not going to have with you. And then you find out that the hopes are actually fears, things that I didn't want are happening with you. And the bad things that happen, I'm actually now seeing in you. And so, I grew up rejected, abandoned, never feeling like I had mattered or I was loved. Get joined the Navy at age 19, get stationed in Jackson, Florida, meet my bride. And Luella grew up in an alcoholic home with a lot of craziness and brokenness. So 2 broken people found each other. And though we did love each other, we really didn't know how to love well. I mean, loving well was not something we knew how to do. And so I didn't expect that I would find rejection. But yet, in our marriage, early on, because of the way Luella was raised and because of the church that she was attending, she was taught that if I was to be the good husband, then I had to meet this requirement, A, B, C, D, and E. And it was taught there that you're only a good Christian and a good person, good, acceptable if you do these things. Well, I wasn't a lot of those things. I didn't want to be. I wasn't raised in legalism. I wasn't even raised as a Christian. But the problem was, because I didn't fit her expectations of what she expected me to be, I found myself being rejected. I found myself not being good enough. The criticism started to come about me and my appearance. And it was more the same growing up. It was just more of the same. See, I married this girl and I'm not even good enough for her. More rejection. And so you learn in rejection that you have to guard your heart, but you don't get married to thinking you're going to get rejected. You don't get married expecting rejection. But here's reality. Rejection is a part of life. It is. It's a part of life. Get used to it. You don't have to like it, and it feels pretty bad, but it is a part of life. And And the fact that we're human, we will feel rejected by those we love. You'll feel rejected and you can feel abandoned by people that you value, friends. I've had friends walk away from me because they didn't like my hurt or pain or some of my thinking. Rejection, because I didn't fit in. It's really a form of tribalism if you think about it. I'll accept you as long as you fit the thinking of my tribe. If you don't think the thinking of my tribe, they won't have nothing to do with you. You know, tribalism and this thinking has been around for centuries, from the very beginning of mankind. It's just a different form. We don't get married, though, expecting to be rejected by our spouses. And then when we are rejected by a spouse, this is just as significant, and if not more significant, than being rejected by one's family. Being rejected by your spouse is significant, but it can be even more significant in terms of pain than when you were rejected by your family. So I never thought that the world would reject me. But what I never really thought is that there would be sexual rejection. And guess what? There'll be times you'll have that in marriage as well. If it's dominating in your marriage, that's a problem. But there will be times they may reject you. And so we want to talk about this idea of sexual rejection in marriage and what is it and what it's about. That's what we're going to kind of focus on. Now, this is interesting for those that you're hanging out with me here listening. Rejection is something you feel. It's something you feel in your brain. But you know what research on the brain shows? This is fascinating. That the place that we feel rejection in the brain is the same place in the brain where you actually feel physical pain. Did you get that? Where when you feel physical pain, it's the same area of the brain that you feel rejection. It's the same area of the brain. This is why rejection has a physical aspect to it. You can feel it. And it hurts even in your body. Sexual rejection, though, in marriage is a unique type of pain. Why? Well, marriage is about two people who love each other. And they come together for a deep level of intimacy, a deep level of connecting, a deep bond. We call that to develop an usness. And us wins, you both win. And us loses, you both lose. And you know you have us in the house because you feel its presence. And you know you don't because you feel its absence. And so you don't go into marriage expecting rejection. But because the marital bond by design is a deep, intimate relationship of vulnerability, nakedness, if you will, right? Not naked in terms of body, but naked in terms of soul, feelings. The most intimate form of relationship is marriage. That sex is a sexual relationship is an outgrowth of that divine spark, that sense of deep level of knowing. There's a spiritual aspect to that kind of love. And out of that deep love you both have, the sexual relationship flows. So the sexual relationship is the health of sexual relationship is linked to the health of the marriage. It's linked to the health of the marriage, which is linked to the health of the individuals. Michelle Wiener Davis wrote a groundbreaking book quite a few years ago. Now, Michelle is one of the leaders in the field of marriage therapy. I mean, she's written quite a few books. Divorce Busting is one of her greats. But quite a few years ago, she wrote a book called The Sex-Starved Marriage. The Sex-Starved Marriage. And she actually did a TED Talk on it. And by the way, it's one of the most listened to TED Talks. All right. You can go pull it up on YouTube and watch Michelle talk about what she's learned and what's happening across the country. More and more marriages are foregoing sex. More and more marriages, we're seeing more and more sexual rejection where one person doesn't want it and the other is desiring it. And so it's a great book to read. I'm going to refer you there. All right. What does sexual rejection do? Number one, it leads to feeling being unloved. Sexual rejection sends a message: I don't love you. You feel unloved. Because if you love me, why don't you want me? Why don't you desire me? Why aren't you attracted to me? It affects a person's self-esteem. When a spouse experiences sexual rejection, they begin to doubt their lovability. They begin to doubt whether they're adequate. They begin to doubt whether they're loved by you. They begin to question what's wrong with them. Our brains are used to taking things and making it about ourselves. So your self-esteem is affected. It increases rejection you might already feel and actually heightens it. Creates anger, can lead to depression, feelings of being unworthy, unlovable, not good enough, undesired, not wanted. All of that are the effects of sexual rejection. And yet, it continues happening. And money is the leading reason for divorce today still, and sexual issues are the second one. So there are 4 rejection strategies, and these were developed by Dr. James Kim from the University of Toronto. I thought these were interesting, his work. So I'm going to kind of give these to you for you to kind of think about. All right. So there's 4 rejection strategies, he calls them. And these are based on preliminary surveys that he did of married couples, and his colleagues found that these sexual rejection strategies are basically 4 categories or 4 types. So let's kind of look at those. Number one, he said one category of sexual rejection strategy is the reassuring rejection. The reassuring rejection. Here's what they write. You explain that you don't want to have sex tonight, but you reassure your partner that you love them and are still attracted to them. You also offer alternative forms of physical contact, such as kissing and snuggling, while promising to make it up to them in the near future. It's like you're rejecting them, but you want to let them down softly. You want to let them down lightly. And so as you begin to let them down softly or lightly, all right, you think you're doing them a favor, but either way, they're still being rejected. And then you offer, well, I'll be willing to do this and this, but I'm not going to do this. And I'll make it up to you in the future. Well, when is that going to be? I don't know, but I'll make it up to you. But when? I don't know. This actually allows the rejector to feel good about the rejecting, believing and thinking that if I do it this way, then I can still send the message I love you and care about you, but I still don't have to meet the needs or be there for you sexually. You see? And so the downside of this kind of rejection is most of these folks who do this reassuring rejection, they're doing it out of a sense of care and love that they believe, and I think on some level it is. However, because they don't follow through on the promise to make it up, and they don't understand you are still rejecting. In the end, they're still being rejected. And there's a sense of, do you care? Well, of course I care, but I'm not able to. But okay, and then they ask again, desire for connection, and you get this, they get the same reassuring rejection over and over and over. So the reassuring rejection is one category. The second type of sexual rejection noted by Dr. James Kim at the University of Toronto is this. He calls it hostile rejection. Hostile rejection. Here they write, you display frustration towards your partner, or you criticize other aspects of the relationship. Likewise, you may give your partner the silent treatment or criticize the way they initiated sex. Basically, this is the type that's critical, that's insensitive, that's unfeeling, that's demeaning, And out of all of that, I'm not going to have sex with you. It's fault finding. Ultimately, it's getting what you want and them not getting what they want. The good side for you is you get to feel powerful because they did something and you're punishing them for it. You see, the only problem is it whittles away the us. It tears down your partner. At least in reassuring rejection, you're not tearing them down. You're still rejecting, but you're not tearing them down. Here, you're tearing them down. You're attacking. You're sending the message. There's something wrong with you, and that's just the way it's going to be. Hostile rejection will never build an us, but on one level, it can lead to contempt. Showing contempt for your partner. You know, there's a difference between contempt and anger. Anger, when two people are angry at each other, essentially they're saying, though I'm angry at you, unconsciously, they still see each other as equals. So you still treat each other as if you're equal. Contempt is more insidious. Contempt for your partner essentially says, I am morally superior to you. So how do you show contempt? Rolling your eyes at them, pursing your lip, pointing out all their deficiencies and how much better yours are. Contempt is very destructive. As a matter of fact, contempt is one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, a term that John Gottman gave to the 4 traits that predict divorce at 93%. Contempt is one of them. Hostile rejection can lead to contempt for your partner. You're contemptuous towards them. So why would I want to give myself to you? No love in it for sure. And you still get the rejection, and the rejector still gets rejected with all the contempt and anger and all the criticism. And the rejectee or the rejector doesn't have to give. Third form category or form of rejection, based on Dr. James Kim's work, is what he calls assertive rejection. Assertive rejection. Let me read here. You explain to your partner in a clear and direct manner why you don't want to have sex. You explain to your partner in a clear and direct manner why you don't want to have sex, which sounds nice. Well, the reason I don't want to do this now is because this, and this, and this, and yada, yada, right? You go on. And he goes on here and says, while you're honest with them, you also, this is the key to it, even though you're explaining to them in a clear and direct manner why you're not going to have sex with them, you're honest with them. The downside of assertive rejection is you have little regard for their feelings. You have little regard and empathy for what they're going through being rejected. Being rejected. And so because you're clear and assertive about why, they understand the why, but in the end, they're still hurting. They're still feeling rejected. They're feeling unloved. They're feeling that there's something wrong with them. And the message you send is a cold, stony, I don't care. Real simple. I don't care. I'm doing it for these reasons. This is why I'm doing it. But little regard for the pain, the hurt, the rejection, the abandonment, and all the other stuff that goes on inside of them. But you feel good about yourself because you actually, you are honest. But in the end, there's no empathy. There's a lack of compassion. And even though you may continue to move on and go do what you want to do, they're still hurting. And it begs the question, does anybody care? You know, I've learned something in my work, and we talk about it, is Americans don't value relationships. We value winning arguments. We value being right. We value hyper-individualism. And in our individualism, we've actually created a very immature society. You see, true healthy maturity, which is about emotional development, can only happen in close, healthy relationships. But the breakdown of the family has led to isolation and loneliness. We don't have healthy people connecting and maturing, because maturity comes through relationship. That's why we're so immature. We value being individual rather than connection. And if I do have a connection, it's on my terms. There's such high divorce rates for that, right? And so you never want to send a message, I don't care, but we do it rather regularly. One of the 4 protectors of Relate Well, which is our program that teaches people how to have healthy, connect relationships with anybody and to help us become healthy, mature adults so we can love and relate well in all aspects of relationships. The fundamentals there are what we call the 4 protectors of an us: goodwill, respect, humility, and empathy as a way of being. That's the problem with the sort of rejection. It lacks empathy. It lacks compassion for the effects of the rejection on that one being rejected. And the 4th form, the 4th category of rejection that Dr. Kim and his team found there at the University of Toronto is what they call deflecting rejection. Deflecting rejection. Here they write, you pretend not to notice that your partner is interested in sex. You may also turn away from them, lie in a position that it's hard to snuggle with, or pretend to be asleep. This is actually what I experienced early on. Luella didn't know what to do. I mean, she's got a lower sex drive. I have a higher sex drive. Every relationship has that. Read Dr. Michelle Wiener Davis's book, that we're in all relationships, there's one that higher sex drive, one that lower sex drive. That's not bad. That's just differences. The problem is couples aren't having sex, foregoing it, because the one that doesn't want it usually went out because they don't want it, and the one that does want it ends up suffering. But the one that doesn't want it doesn't suffer. The only suffering they get is the complaining of the one that's wanting it. But the reason they're complaining is because there's a pain there. But the one that doesn't want it's not caring about that. So one of the ways you can deal with that feeling, oh gosh, they're wanting sex, I'll fake like I'm asleep, or I'll act like I'm angry, or whatever it is. So you deflect it. So you shift it away from the focus on the need for the desire for sex, and you just deflect it as if you're doing something else, or busy or preoccupied. Some people actually will change the subject, and some people will create conflict in another area to get away from it. All of that is still a form of rejection. It's because I don't want to deal with saying no, so I'll just act like I'm asleep. Luella used to turn her back on me and go to sleep. And I'm like, well, I don't want to wake her up, so I'll leave her alone. Fortunately, 37 years of marriage, my wife are in a very, very wonderful place. We are in us. We have grown and matured so much. It doesn't mean I'm perfect. It doesn't mean she's perfect. It does mean that we mature enough that we don't argue and yell and scream or do anything like that. We actually meet each other's needs, and we're patient with each other. We're kind with each other because we value us more than ourselves. We meet each other's needs. And we do it in healthy ways, not immature, unhealthy ways. So deflecting rejection is another of those strategies. So what are the 4 strategies identified by research at the University of Toronto, Dr. James Kim and his team? Reassuring rejection. Number 2 is hostile rejection. Number 3 is assertive rejection. And number 4 is deflecting rejection. And everybody has their way of dealing with rejection. Some people turn to anger. They're just angry. Why? Anger is what's known as a secondary emotion. It's a cover for pain. It's more pleasurable to feel anger than the pain that's underneath it, you see, because anger covers pain. It's safer than feeling the pain itself. Think of it this way. Would you rather feel rejection, or would you rather feel angry that you were rejected? You want to feel the anger that you were rejected. Why? It's safer. It's actually safer to feel that. To feel the rejection? Oh man, no way. That's painful. That's vulnerable. And so many people do rejection by getting angry. And now you're angry, you're being rejected. So what do? A lot of strategies. Yell, scream, sulk, whine, threaten. There's a lot of things that people do when they feel rejected, when they're angry. Some people take that rejection and turn it to fear. Well, I'm afraid that I'm not lovable. I'm afraid that I'm not good enough. I'm afraid that I'll never be good enough. I'm afraid that if I don't get you to notice me, then our marriage would fall apart. Fear. And what the fear does, a lot of times, it elevates itself to an all-important status. So you start to do things to take your needs from the other person. Maybe you take it by threatening. If you don't do this, then I'm going to. Or maybe you do it the way I used to do it back in those early years of my marriage, in the first 8 or 9 years. I'd sulk. I'd whine. That's what I'd do. Don't want to meet my needs? Fine. I ain't talking to you. I'm not proud of this, folks, but it is what I did. Why? I was still emotionally a child. One thing we talk about and relate well, we talk about the emotional stages of development. We actually identify what is an emotional infant, what is an emotional child, what is an emotional adolescent, what does a mature adult look like. My goal is to become a mature adult. Now, my wife says I am, so I don't have to believe her, right? But I wasn't when we first got married. I was emotionally a child. And so when I felt rejection, I just sulk and whine. So some people get angry. Some people turn to fear. Some people take that and they turn it to pain. And the reason is they already believe they're not good enough. They're unlovable. They're not desired. And some people get angry. Some get afraid. But some people get depressed. Now, they may have come into the relationship already believing those things about themselves anyways. And yet, when there's sexual rejection, you continue sending the message, I don't desire you. And what do they hear? I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm undesirable. I'm inadequate. That's how they'll interpret it. And all that leads to depression. Some people will take that pain and say, fine, then I'll just go meet the needs myself. And then you see people moving into pornography and all kinds of things like that. Why? They can't take the pain, but the need is still there at the biological level. So then, if I can't depend on you to be there, then I have to depend on myself. I'm not saying I agree with those choices, but some people, they're fine. If you don't care enough about this part of our relationship and me and these needs I have, then I'm in a position to make decisions for myself. Now, does that mean the rejector is responsible for those choices that person makes? The answer is no. They're not responsible for their choices. However, I would say they are responsible for creating an environment where that person would want to think that way. You know, I tell people, if you act a certain way on a regular basis, you're going to start creating conversations in a person's head they never wanted to have for themselves. People start creating conversations in their mind they never wanted to have. I never wanted to have the conversation in my head. Do you love me? Do you desire me? Am I good enough? I never wanted those conversations in my head, but they showed up. They did show up. And sadly, because I was so broken-winded, those kinds of conversations showed up for Llewellyn. And so these are the things that people do to try and deal with sexual rejection. So what are some steps that you can take? Steps that you can take if it's present, sexual rejection. Number one, set up a time where you won't be interrupted by phone or kids. Set up a time where you both can talk. And when you talk to each other, be vulnerable, be open and honest. Take a risk. Listen, if I feel rejected by you enough, it'd be a risk to be honest with you. Why? Because you may not care and I'll feel more rejection. So when you sit down and talk, have a strategy for talking. Use communication skills. Check out Relate Well. We have great communication skills that teach you how to talk about these things. Listen well to each other. Honor each other's perspectives. Care about how they think and feel. And when you're talking, be non-judgmental. Don't judge them. What a person thinks and feels is just how they think and feel. You don't have to agree with it. But I can accept that's how you think and feel, and I can accept that you do things that I wouldn't agree with. that I would never agree with. Listen, folks, over 30 years in this field, I work with people who've dealt with sexual issues by pornography, adultery, I mean, a lot of stuff. I don't judge it. Why? Broken people do broken things. I'm not saying I agree with it or support what they do, but I don't judge it. I don't judge it. And so one of the things is when you sit down, don't judge your partner. And also, just because your partner has a lower sex drive, don't judge that. That's me and Luella. I got a higher sex drive. She has a very low one. That's not good or bad. That's difference. That's just difference. Michelle talks about these things in her book, The Sex Starved Marriage. I encourage you to get the book if this is what you're struggling with. But be non-judgmental. All right. Number 3, allow your partner to share their feelings and thoughts. When you sit down, let them open up, tell you their fears, their hurt, their concerns, why the lack of desire exists. You might find out it comes from history of sexual abuse, or it might come back for whatever. All right. Who knows? Don't get defensive. One of the hallmarks of mature people is that mature people have the ability to enter into another person's emotional intensity and not personalize it. Immature people take those things personal. It isn't about you. It's just where they are. Don't get defensive. Don't get defensive. It's just who they are, where they are. It's their thoughts and feelings. Honor it, respect it. You don't have to agree. So number 3, allow your partner to share their thoughts and feelings. Don't get defensive. All right. Then ask yourself, number 4, ask yourself this question. What can I do to change? What do I need to change? Maybe I need to be intentional about becoming a little more assertive. And maybe I need to step back and not be so manipulative and trying to get it from her, right? What can I do different that can make a difference to make it easier for us to begin to express itself in healthy sexual relationships? All right. So what do you need to change? Now, if you have diagnoses like dyspareunia, vaginismus, erectile dysfunctions, those kind of things that kind of create the low desire, those things can be treated when you go and you do that by going seeing a professional who's also trained in sex therapy. That's what you do. Go get help for those things. If it's medical, go talk to your doctor. What is it that's affecting your libido? If you're on certain kinds of medicine actually shut down people's libido. Talk to your doctor. All right. Some people have a religious belief system that increases their ability to not want sex because of the way they were taught about it. All right. Some people, you may have to change some of your thinking around sex and marriage theologically. Some people were abused, and because of the abuse and all that, what it did, they have no desire for sex. Go get help. Get help. Change. I remember I worked with a couple a long time ago. Actually, I wasn't working with them. They actually did one of my treats, and she was sexually abused, and she kept rejecting her husband. And they came up the first night after the first night of the event. The retreat was over. I got to talk a little slowly here. And they shared this problem with me. And I said to her, and I said, where does this come from? She goes, I was sexually abused. And I said, I respect that. Have you done counseling? I'm in counseling now. And I said, okay. And I said, I think I have a way to help you. She said, how can you do that? I said, the part of your brain that's rejecting him, which is known as the emotional brain, the limbic system, there's something it doesn't know yet. And she said, what's that? Your brain approaches sex with your husband the same way it approached and dealt with the abuse. She goes, yes, it feels the same. I go, right. Here's what your brain hasn't done. It hasn't given, you have not given yourself permission to create a distinction between this man that loves you and that man that hurts you. She goes, it feels the same, doesn't it? Well, you said it does. She goes, Huh. And I go, so here's a question for you. Is he on any level to any degree like your abuser? And she's like, no, not at all. I mean, I love him. I said, what if you gave yourself permission to be sexual with this guy who isn't like that person and not anyone else in the world? She goes, I could do that. I said, okay. So next morning, second day of the retreat starts. They come in and he's smiling. And I looked over at him and I said, did something happen last night? She goes, oh, yeah. Because she's able to give herself permission to separate out what was from what is. And by giving herself permission, she made the ability to give herself freedom to be free with him, but keep everyone else out. And she continued her counseling and did a lot of healing. But from that point, she wasn't rejecting as much because she could create a distinction between what was and what is. All right. And so the last thing I would tell you to do, so let me go these steps. Set up interrupted free time to talk. Be non-judgmental when you do. All right. Allow your partner to share his or her feelings and thoughts about this thing. All right. Don't get defensive. That's key. All right. What do you need to change? Where do you need to get help in this thing? All right. Do you need to be more patient? Do you need more intentional? And the last thing is, and this is difficult sometimes for couples to think about, but I actually find it to be very helpful. Set up a time to actually engage in sex. Schedule it on your calendar. There is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong. Write down Friday night, we're going to go on a date starting at 6, and we're going to have sex that night. Just schedule it. It's okay. It's normal. It does not always have to be spontaneous. I don't think that's reality anyways. Schedule it. Put it into your calendar if you need to. There's nothing wrong with that because you both get to look forward to that time. And if you put it on a calendar, then the low sex drive person doesn't feel like every night I'm wondering if he or she is going to be wanting sex, right? But it gives the one who is looking for that connection security that it's going to happen. They're going to have that time of intimacy, all right, and romance with you. And so those are some strategies that I think that I could kind of encourage you in, all right, as you think about it. Sexual rejection is going to happen at times. You don't want it to be dominant in the marriage. If it is, that's a problem. It's a problem. And if it's very dominant and you see and your marriage is starved for it, I encourage you to get the book, The Sex Starved Marriage by Michelle Weiner Davis. If you're not sure how to bond and connect well, that's what we do in Relate Well. We actually teach people how to have a healthy connection, how to bond well, how to communicate well, how to emotionally regulate well, so that in that deep sense of connection, we call it the usness, the sex relationship can flow. Hopefully this has been helpful, maybe in some way informative, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen. It's Relate Well with Dr. Rick Marks. Have a great rest of your day.